Hi, I'm Laurie McDermott. I run a website called thewifeexpert.com, and this podcast supports that. And I often invite guests on who have stories to tell about marriage, life, death, things happening. So, because I want you guys to learn from other people's stories. It's not reinventing the wheel because someone already did it. And whether it's a positive story or a negative story, it is a story. And so today's guest is actually someone who wrote a book recently. He's a lawyer, and I don't know anything about it. I don't read the book ahead of time. I don't want to know too much about the person I interview because I want to start from scratch. Tell me your story. So let's meet him. So, my next guest is an amazing author and also a very important person. And he's a man, and I'm going to be so excited to learn everything I can about him. His name is Todd Kelly. He recently wrote a book, and I've heard about the book, and people have suggested I read the book, and I haven't read it yet because I was more or less looking to interview him to find out, should I read the book? I think it's going to have a lot to offer us because we've all been, struggling with situations. So, without, causing any more controversy here. Todd, hello.
Hi, Laurie. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. I am honored and grateful that you're taking the time to speak to my audience because these women need help and comfort and hope. And just by hearing your story gives them an insight to men because, someone already wrote the book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And as much as
Right.
we hear about that, we don't believe it, but it's true. So,
Right.
anyway, so a couple questions.
Sure.
Tell me, so the book you wrote is called The Power Within.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, the power within really is about the power that stopped me from pulling a trigger when I had a 9 millimeter pistol in my mouth for about
Mm,
45 minutes, sitting in a closet in 2011. And the power's name is Jesus. Um,
mm,
but what put me there was a walk away from him and a walk towards a life of sin that I imagine a lot of your listeners have witnessed from from the other side. I know that my wife at the time witnessed it and suffered a lot of pain at my hand because of the fact that I had turned from my own beliefs and turned from what I knew was right. Um, and ultimately, it left me in that closet where I very seriously contemplated taking my life.
wow. Okay, so let's back up. When did you get married?
So I was married in 1988. Um, she and I was a Marine at the time, and I met her in Virginia, and was about to get orders to Hawaii, and so we kind of had a whirlwind uh, courtship and romance, and got married so that we could get her on my orders, so that I wasn't leaving to go to Hawaii without her.
Mm.
And so it was pretty fast, but we were married for even if you count all of the destruction at the end and the finalizing of it, it was almost 25 years.
What year did you get divorced?
We were divorced in 2012.
Okay, so right after that scene. So when did things, I'm assuming when you first got married, things were great. Did you have any kids?
We had 3 kids.
Three
So we
kids?
were married in '88. My oldest kids, my twins, were born in June of '90. And then we had another son in January of '95. And so we
Okay.
had 3 kids at the time that we were splitting up.
Okay. Okay. And then so I'm assuming everything was great. Things were good up until the time that they weren't.
Well, so my twins were born prematurely. Um, Caused a lot of stress on the marriage. It did not cause, and actually none of it caused it. My weakness caused it, but it did not lead to an infidelity. It did not result in that right away. Infidelity didn't come until I was in law school. I'm an attorney, and during law school, I got some attention that from younger women that I had not had in quite a while. Um, what the stress of premature infants had done is it kind of had changed the focus of the marriage significantly from romance towards one another to focusing on the kids.
Mm,
And we had sort of, slipped into this, I'll always just be there, she'll always just be there, which is a dangerous place to go. And we had not given the marriage the attention that that it definitely deserved, and we didn't give each other that attention. And so when I did get attention from other people, I gave into it. Um,
What year was that when you were in law school?
I was in law. That would have happened in 1992, so we would have been
Okay.
married for about 4 years at that time.
Okay.
Uh, and we struggled through that. We tried
Did
to
she find
repair.
out?
Yes, she did. Law school was like, in my book, I talk about it like it's got more gossip than a women's hair salon.
Law
Um,
school? You're
oh,
kidding.
it's the most gossipy place I've ever been.
I would
Um,
never have guessed that. That's hilarious.
yeah, it is hilarious looking back. It was not hilarious at the time, but there are no secrets in law school. Um, and anyway, so that's kind of, I again, the book was written. I'll just tell you something. Since we're talking about the book, it's written. When I first started it, I thought I was writing a secular book to trial lawyers because we have one of the highest incidents of suicide and depression of any profession.
I did not
So
know that.
yeah, it's very, very high.
Why is that?
Um, I have a theory that it has to do with what we call secondhand stress. So we take on the stress of our clients a little at a time, but we take on hundreds of clients at a time. So if I'm only getting a fraction of a percentage of the stress that they have, but I have hundreds of them at a time, over years it beats you down. And so we also have a very high rate of alcoholism and drug addiction and that sort of thing. Again, all related, I think, to how to deal with and how to cope with the secondhand stress. Um, and so one of those behaviors, at least the behavior that I was most guilty of, had to do with um, uh, basically solving my own ego. And I would solve my ego by chasing women. And that is something that I think had always been a weakness for me from a very early age. And again, I talk about it in my book. I think it's the avenue that a lot of men have, and I certainly have it. And it's the one I think that, in my case, Satan used the most was to, kind of give me this salve to an addiction. In fact, if you're okay with it, I wrote a poem. One of the things I've done in the book is I separate each chapter with a poem because it's kind of how I've always dealt with my emotional thoughts. And the poem I want to read to you might explain it a little bit. It's called
Yeah,
Addicted.
I would love that.
Yeah, so I wrote this called Addicted, and it's not very long. It says, as a boy, I do not know the harm, awaiting just beyond the charm. We chased the girls and thought it cool, because that's the talk of boys at school. Never thinking of the harm I'd cause, just like a wonder straight from Oz. Emotions burning without control or concern that I might pay a toll. Ignoring risk, it just feels right. Perhaps another quest tonight. Perhaps emotion, perhaps just skin. That last encounter left me thin. It's like a drug and I its slave. I know it's wrong to thus behave. But who's the victim? Where's the crime? Besides, I'm only marking time. With each new partner, I am less, but I push on despite the mess. Those closest to me should distrust, for I have given in to lust. I do not want to be this man, but fill a void I think I can. So I chase sex as if my next meal. Momentary highs are all I steal.
Wow.
That had become my life. And
That's an incredible poem.
thank you.
That's inside your book?
Yes.
Wow. That's enough. That's a reason to get that book.
Thanks.
That
Yes.
that's an amazing poem. That sums up a lot of my listeners' feelings. Yeah, that's
Well,
great.
I think there's a lot of men that fall into this trap. I think it's, one of the things that we know is that Satan uses sex as a way to get in. And um, it's without a doubt the most wide open gate in my life. And I have to consciously guard it if I'm not going to fall back into that trap. And, I'm today, as I'm talking to you, I'm very happily married with another young child. And, I have a chance to do life again and do it better and do it right. But I know this weakness is there. And so I just don't, I don't ignore it, because ignoring it leaves it open. And I think that's one of the things that at least in my life, that I did. I thought, well, I'm married, I'm happy, everything's good. I don't have to pay attention to that weakness. And I let my guard down. And that weakness just was always there. And as soon as the opportunity came, I couldn't fight it. And I wasn't prepared.
Okay, so take me back to law school. So you've
Okay.
got these women. Now your wife and you have this situation,
Right.
and things kind of go up in arms. And I'm assuming you promised her you wouldn't do that again, or you're going to guard that.
I did, and I meant it.
Yeah.
At the time I made that promise, I absolutely meant it. I had no intentions of going back. I hated who I was for having done it. Um, I hated the sin, but
But were they like, was it like an affair, or was it just like little flings?
the first one was an affair.
Okay.
Um, I wish I could say it was one. It was multiple. Over the years, I fell into this trap a lot. Um, and
But you
sometimes
never did that. Like, I want everyone to understand. You never had these flings and affairs because intentionally you were saying, I want to hurt my wife. They were just a need to yourself, right?
it was, yes. I was
Yeah.
I was focused on me. It was a selfish, self-gratifying thing. One of the things I talk about is um, so when I one of the things I do in my book, after I start the book, I go and I talk about who I am as a child. And one of the things as a child, my father worked for Bell Helicopter. We were living in Iran. We lived in Iran for 4 years. When I
Wow.
came when I came back from Iran, I was an eighth grader, and this was back before they had really good medication to take care of acne and all those sorts of things. And so I was not exactly, God's gift to women, right, or God's gift to girls, I guess, at that point. And
That was a
the
struggle, I'm sure.
it was, and then the destruction it did to my ego ended up being the avenue, I think, for which everything became, you know, I mean, my it was an open door, because as soon as I started to gain the attention of women, suddenly that was where I based my self worth. If women gave me attention, then I was valuable. If they didn't, then I wasn't. And all
Interesting.
all through college, well, high school and college, I mean, chasing women was a full time sport, because it was how I fed my ego, which had been so deflated and so, um, and left. I was starving for it. And
What were your folks like?
my folks are wonderful. I didn't grow up in a Christ-centered home. My parents, I think they would call themselves Christian, but they did not attend service. In fact, my introduction to Christ was through a family friend. But they are wonderful parents. They've been married for. So my birth father was killed when I was less younger than I can remember. So I think I was about a year old when he was killed. My father is the only dad I've ever known, and has been married to my mother for 55 years.
Wow.
Um, and just, I wish I could be like my dad. I mean, he's been faithful to my mother, and they're every bit the example that I wish I had been to my children. But in fact, if my kids want an example of what a great dad looks like, look at my dad, not me.
Yes, cool.
Yeah. Um, so they're wonderful people.
Have you told him that?
The kids?
No, your dad.
Oh yeah, he knows. Yeah, I write poetry. Sometimes he gets some of it.
Oh, what a nice gift. That's
Yeah,
great.
it's how I've always dealt with emotions. I remember, when the towers were coming down on 9/11, I was actually sitting in my office writing a poem about it. I wish I could find that one. It's gone. It's been gone for years. But
Wow.
it's just how I emotionally dealt with the situation at the time.
That's really cool. Okay, so now you're in law school, you've dealt with this situation with the girls, and so how do we get to being in a closet? How do we get there?
So slowly over time, so there, without going through excruciating detail of the number of times that I cheated on my wife. Some of those times I was caught. Some of those times I was not. Um, I,
And
you
yet
know,
you kept doing it. What do you think that was? It was that drive.
it was an ego. It
It was
was,
ego.
yeah, there was, and unfortunately I had done the damage to the marriage so that the woman I was married to didn't really want a lot to do with me sexually. When we would try to put it back together, it was just never the same. She tried. I know she tried, but it was not the same. It's not her fault, but the trust was gone. I destroyed it. Um, but there was no putting it back together, no matter how much we tried, and no matter how much she would say the words "I forgive you," she didn't. She couldn't. And
How did you know that? How did you know that?
you just there was no trust. There was no, I traveled a lot for work, um, and when you get the third degree on every trip,
Mm.
um, after a while, you're like, you know what? If I'm gonna do if I'm gonna pay the price, then I'm gonna enjoy it, right? It's kind of, if I'm gonna do
Mm.
the time, I'll do the crime. Um, she believed I was cheating on her, even the times that I wasn't. To the
Yeah.
point where I was just like, I'm tired of, and again, that's not an excuse. It's just a fact. I was tired of paying a price for something I wasn't doing. At times, sometimes it's not that at all, but a lot of it was, once I destroyed the trust, there was no getting it back. And so um, I knew that trust was gone, and I knew that even when we tried to fix it, it just was not really fixable. And
Okay.
so I didn't. It wasn't always, like I said, it wasn't always a relationship. Sometimes it literally was. This is feeding my ego, and I knew what it was. It might be just a night. It might be. Um, it might be longer than that. It might be a weekend. It might be just a night. But then
So
there were
I'm gonna
times.
ask
Sure.
I'm gonna ask you a question, right?
All
So
right.
it's just a night, right? It's just a night. So a lot of women that I work with
Mm-hmm.
say, but he was emotionally connected to her. And I try to explain it's just sex. It's just a need being filled, like a scratch, right?
Sometimes.
Is there a way that you can explain that to my
Yeah.
listeners?
Yeah. So the scratch, it's not physical. It is emotional. Sure, there's a physical act. All of that, and I think I hope she's okay with me talking about it. My wife now, right? There's times in when we discuss, how one of us gets in the mood versus the other, and it can be literally just physical with my wife, but it doesn't mean I don't love her. I don't want a deep relationship, and that the relationship is emotional and long term and meaningful. But that act can be just physical for a guy. Whereas I know, for at least for my wife, it's got the emotion has to be right. The mood has to be right for her. It's a little bit different when you're talking about an affair. The emotion is actually the most important thing, but it's not emotion about the woman. It's selfish emotion. It's about me. It's about, how do I feel about me? And the fact that this random girl or woman at a bar is interested in me in this moment makes me feel good about me. There must be something to me. It is extremely selfish. It is. I mean, I'm a little embarrassed to be having a conversation because of how selfish it is, but that's really what it is. It's totally about me. And as I got older and felt, you know, age creeping up, and it was even more important to feed that need, um,
Yeah.
because I was losing my youth, right? And so it was, like I said, it was very selfish.
Yeah.
Um, it really, and it was, there was a gaping hole that really I needed filled, and I keep coming back to it, but it's just the truth. Like, I needed it filled with Jesus. I needed that hole filled with something that could actually fill it, and not what I was trying to fill it with.
And how did you figure that out? Okay, so you're in this mode of trying to fill this comfort, and then what happened to you prior to wanting to kill yourself? What was that straw that
So
happened?
there was a cascade of events, and some of them were related to my marriage, and some of them weren't. So I had started to drink quite heavily at one point. I became fairly I won't say well, but I had some cases that had a lot of notoriety. We were on 2020. We were on the Rachel Maddow show. We were on a lot of big stuff, and I had actually presented to chambers of Congress, and so we kind of thought we were a big deal, right? Um, or let me rephrase that. I thought I was a big deal, and the thing is, it was pride. I had allowed myself to think, look what I did, look how great I am, and that case went to trial after we did a lot of good with it, but that case went to trial and we lost. On top of that, I had lost another case where my firm had borrowed $12 million and we had lost that one. So this one was the only one with the
Wow.
savings. So I was financially ruined. My marriage was falling apart because of my cheating. And my kids knew it. My kids had discovered emails and things like that had kind of outed the whole thing. And then their friends knew it. And so I was ruined in the public eye. I was ruined. My family was done. And again, I didn't have Christ in my life. I had known him. I had known who he was, but he wasn't in my life at this point in time. And of course, that's because I closed that door. And so, and I was very unhappy in that marriage. It's kind of a long, detailed story, but at that point in time, I had really kind of written the marriage off. As far as I was concerned, it was done. I didn't want to hurt my wife at the time, but I mean, after all, she was the mother of my 3 kids. She had stood by me for a lot of stuff, but I was done. And
Yeah.
and I was in love with another woman who is now my wife. And I didn't think there was any way to get to her. I didn't think there was any way to pull out of this situation. And so I mean, some of the demons in my head, because I was insured, and I knew that if I was dead and they paid insurance money, the debt wouldn't follow it because the debt was mine, not theirs. And so I really had the thoughts in my head, you are literally worth more dead than you are alive. And you're worth more to your family, and you'll do your family more good if you just kill yourself. And that was the struggle, part of the struggle. There was a lot, but that was part of the struggle that took me into that closet and led to that gun in my mouth.
Wow. And what made you get out of the closet?
So, in short, Jesus.
So you're in
But
the closet and Jesus shows up.
he
And
does.
let's be clear about something. I know people on a podcast a lot of them can't see, but this guy sits on my desk. It's a picture of Jesus. I
Well,
live and breathe it. So
he
yes,
didn't.
I believe. Did he show up in the closet? Tell me
He
about
didn't.
that.
He didn't show up in his person, but yes, he was there. And I didn't. I didn't recognize that he was there for years. But what he did is he showed up and showed me a vision, and it was the only thing that could have stopped me.
Hmm.
And the vision that he showed me was my boys finding me because they were the ones who would have been home next.
Yeah.
And when I saw what I would do to them after all I had already done, I couldn't pull that trigger. So I put it down and I went back out. Now, keep in mind, I haven't shared the whole thing. Again, all this is in my book, but
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
I,
definitely going to read your book.
I was 3 days in a chair, wallowing in self-pity, booze, and body odor in my room after losing that trial before the closet incident. I didn't go straight home and go to the closet. I sat there and wallowed in this stuff for a while first. And the moment in the closet was the time when I was home alone. My daughter and my daughter was home from college and had gone shopping with my wife. And the boys were out doing something, but they were there. I think they were at a friend's house, and so I knew the boys would be home first because that was typical, and that's who would have found me. So I go back to the chair, and what got me back to work was my client, whose case I had just lost. called me and said, "I understand you're not back at work." I said, "No, I can't." And her response to me was, "Well, there are at least 3 other women who have been victimized by the same company that I think need your help." And I thought, if you can be brave enough to say that to me after I just lost your trial, then I think I can get up, take a shower, and go to work. So,
Oh my God.
yeah. And so my wife and I,
That's really cool. That is
uh,
real. Who is this woman?
her name is
I hope you
Jamie.
printed her name in your book. She needs to be, she sounds like an angel.
She is a hero, is what she
She's a
is.
hero.
She wrote the foreword to my book. Um,
Oh, great.
and yeah, she's a hero. Um, but well, the cool thing about the book, and I'll just tell you, because I know this isn't what you uh, brought me on to talk about, but the cool thing about the book and the cool thing about the story is that when Jamie first hired me, what she said is, she says, she had been she had been raped overseas, and it had been covered up by a military contractor, and the case gained a lot of notoriety, and it changed law for a time about forcing women into arbitration when they had been abused sexually overseas, or
Mm.
abused by military contractors. And so there was a very short-lived uh, rider to an amendment, to a budgetary amendment back, and that's what we had been to Congress about. But that was back then, and what was cool about it is that when I was writing my book, it was literally last year, I was sitting at a conference and I got an email from a friend of mine who is very active in the American Association for Justice. And the email is actually also copied in the book. But basically, the email said, in short, that the legislature had just passed um, uh, legislation that would say that no military contractor who's been sexually assaulted or abused overseas can be forced into arbitration. And that was being signed on to by a bipartisan vote, and was going to become federal law. And when she had said it, she said it, and I would be remiss. AAJ had done it. I hadn't been involved in it in years. And she said, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Todd Kelly and his brave client, Jamie Lee Jones, for igniting the spark that caused this fight. And so I sat there years, almost 10 years after I had that gun in my mouth, and I realized I didn't actually lose.
Mm-mm. Didn't lose. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing how God works. I wouldn't have been
Hmm.
here to see it if I had pulled that trigger. But
Right? I'm so impressed. So now you're out of the closet. What happens now?
well, so what happens? What happens now is my wife and I go through and split up, and it's ugly. And I don't know that I feel that I feel that it would be a betrayal to her yet again to go through all of the ugly.
Yeah, no, I don't, I'm not concerned about that. But
Yeah,
during that time, you said it was ugly. So
yeah.
was she kind to you during that time, and were you kind to her during that time?
No,
If one of you had been kind during that time, do you think things would have shifted?
no. I think my mind was made up, and I was already in love with Robbie, my wife.
Oh, okay. So you met, so you said that before. So you already had the affair person that you actually chose, like you're going to keep her.
So yeah, we so we had an attraction. We worked together. We had an attraction for each other, and we had sworn it off. We'd said, we're not going to do this at all. We're not going to act on this. And we actually really tried to keep that. But I mean, literally, my wife left and then came back and then left again. So she left. Her family's from Virginia. She left and moved back to Virginia, and we acted on our feelings for each other. Robbie and I did. And when my ex decided to come back, she said, I want to work it out. I want to come back and work it out. And I said, okay, I'll try. And I actually told Robbie, I said, I'm going to try. And Robbie said, okay, I understand. And so we split, but my heart was out of it. I couldn't, there was no try in me left. In fact, on social media, I actually saw a photograph of Robbie on a date with another guy, and I'm like, I can't do that. I'm in love with her, and I can't do this. I have to go
Yeah.
back. And so, and I knew the damage that would be done at home, and I knew the likelihood that my kids would hate me for a while if, and I was worried that it might never stop. But I couldn't live my life without Robbie. I was in love with her, and I knew that was the one I wanted to be with. And so,
And how long had you known Robbie at that point?
well, I hope she never listens to this and realizes I have to hesitate. Hold on.
I know, like, it's complicated. All these dates I'm
Yeah,
asking you for. It's just like, because other people are going point and reference in their own mind.
I think it was 3 years, and we had worked together
Okay.
for a good portion of that.
Okay.
It might only be 2 years. I'm not going to swear to the dates. It's
Okay.
actually funny. When I wrote the book, I did have Robbie read it, and she said, you got some of this out of order. So that's how good my memory is, right? But
It's all good. It's
uh,
your story. You can make up stuff if you want.
well, no,
So,
she changed the order. It's right now.
oh,
It's
it
right.
is. Okay, good. So, so you were with Robbie on that day you were in the closet.
No,
It
not
was
with her,
after.
not with her physically. She
Oh,
was.
I meant just dating her already.
Yes, I was already in love.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because my ex had left and come back by that point in time.
Okay.
And but Robbie had worked with me. She had actually helped me with the trial. She didn't try the case with me. She didn't want to be in the courtroom because my ex did go to that trial, and
Okay.
there was no. It was a high visibility enough trial without having a scene between, the two of them. That was not going to be
Yeah,
good.
I get it.
So
It. So you've been with Robbie since 2009,
since let me do that math.
11?
2010, I guess.
Okay, 2010. That's right. And did you, when you after the whole suicide thing, did you tell her about what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for her, there's hurt there too, because
Yeah.
I didn't feel that I could reach out to her.
Okay.
Part of part of the demons in my head were, hey, you've hurt everyone you've ever touched, and you're just going to hurt her. And it's interesting. She's actually the one who led me back to Christ.
Yeah. Tell me about that. So how did that happen? So you're out of the closet. You're gonna face your life.
Yeah, I'm gonna face my life. So I actually owned the law firm where I worked when all that happened, but we lost everything. That was the other part. Is I was losing my law firm too when I went into the closet, and it's really hard to tell 8 lawyers who've become practically family to you, sorry, I don't have a job for you anymore. You can use my computers to find a job, because that's really kind of how it was ending. And um, the so I started looking for a job, and there just weren't plentiful jobs in Texas for lawyers in 2012. I got hired by a man who happens to be a believer, and I didn't know that, and frankly didn't care at that point in time. I just needed a job, because we were living off by that point in time. Robbie had a job as a very low paid associate, and we were barely making it on, paying the rent on her salary because she was paying the salary. And I'm like, I can't. A, I don't feel like a man when I'm living off of her salary, and B, it's not enough to live and eat. So I got to do something. And so I took the job um, at the law firm. I'm still at the law firm now. I took that job a little over 10 years ago and moved to Austin. So we were living in Houston when all that happened. Moved to Austin, and we started working. Robbie followed. She was able to work remotely, so she followed me to Austin. We, it was a few months, I guess, started living together. And ultimately we rented a couple of houses, and then eventually I bought a house, kind of dug out of the hole enough to do that, and put my credit score back intact enough to do that.
You
And
need
then,
that.
yeah. And then when we would drive to and from the house, passing by a church that we kept talking about going in, and just never did. I went back to Houston to try a case, and Robbie went. And she called me that Sunday after church, and she said, "You've got to come to this church." I said, "Okay, when this trial's over, I'll come back and we'll go." So I went back, and we went. And the first Sunday that I went was an associate pastor's first sermon to the church. I know this pastor, and he's a very good pastor. He's really dynamic now, but he wasn't that day. That was his first time, and I was unimpressed. And I told my wife, "I'm not so sure I'm going to come back." She said, "No, you got to come back and hear the other guy." And so I went back, and I heard a pastor by the name of Joe Champion, who's also mentioned in my book. And I started listening to him and following him and listening to the word of God coming through his mouth. Today, I'm about to graduate from their Leadership Institute at the church. I've been attending there now for almost 2 years.
Wow.
I serve in that church every Sunday and usually every Friday. I was in church this morning. I was in church last night. I don't know how I would survive. I wouldn't have survived without Jesus coming back in my life. There's just no way.
What year was that when you were going to church, when you started?
2015. It was the end of 2015 when I think it was October, November. One of the beautiful parts about the redemption story is that there's no way that I could look anybody straight in the face and say, "Hey, the way Robbie and I started is the way a marriage is supposed to start," right? Because it started in adultery. But we listened to the message, we listened to the word, and we were living together. And about 8 months before our wedding date, we heard a sermon on the difference between sin and intentional sin. And intentional sin, obviously, is when you know you're doing it wrong when you do it, right? So we were driving off the church property that day after service, and I looked at her and I said, "I can only think of one intentional sin that you and I are committing." And she agreed, and we stopped that day. We couldn't stop living together because financially we had to live in the same house, but celibacy was a thing for the next 8 months. And I got to tell you, for people that started in a passionate way that we started, cutting it off for 8 months before you got married was there were days I was weak. Thank goodness she was strong, and there were days she was weak, and thank goodness I was, because we kept it that way. We were both
Wow.
rebaptized 2 weeks before we got married. And today we have the most gorgeous 3-year-old little girl. Actually, she's not quite 3, but she'll be 3 next month, that you ever wanted to see. We are madly in love with each other today as much as we were then. God is in our house, in our lives. And when I say it's a redemption story, it can be nothing else, because I don't deserve what we have. And, I regret the pain I've caused. I regret the pain I caused my children mostly, but I regret the pain I caused my ex. We are friends for the most part. There's still a lot of history. There's still a lot of hurt, and there's still a lot of, I guess, doubt when we talk. We do talk because we have kids together. And it's...
How is she doing now?
She's married also to a man of faith, and I think she's doing really well. I mean,
So she's a believer as well now?
She's a believer. She was a believer then. We stopped going to church because it was because of me, not because of her. But,
what year did you stop going to church? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I knew you'd ask that question. So when I say stop going to church, we were on and off churchgoers. At one point in time, I had actually served as a deacon at a church.
Prior. Okay.
Yes, when my older kids were very young. I was living in Virginia at the time, and man, that was forever ago. I think the kids were probably, I was just doing rough math, it was probably close to 25 years ago now that had happened. But we attended a church in our neighborhood for probably 2 years, roughly. And during that time, I had become a deacon, and actually during that time, I kind of had my life going right and going in the right. I was doing the right things, and I was doing what I was supposed to do. But professionally, things weren't going the way I wanted to, so we moved. And when we moved, everything kind of changed.
Mm, yeah. So looking back, would you change anything on your life if you could do everything all over again?
It's interesting. I wish that I could say, yeah, I'd do it all differently, but I don't think so. Um, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have Robbie.
Right.
I wouldn't have my
Your little girl.
precious little baby,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't have this story that I hope God will use to save other people.
Yeah.
So it was a rough road, and I do not want to relive it. But to say I'd do it differently, if I could change it, I can't. I can't go there. I can't say I would do
Yeah.
that.
So you actually stopped like that filling of the hole because you found God. You
Yeah,
and you face that challenge and you
yeah.
address it.
I address it. It's not the challenge doesn't go away. I mean, I'm still attracted to women, right? I still remember the void I feel, but I can fill the void a different way. And I can hit my knees and raise my hands and ask God to fill me up. And I don't need the other. Is the desire still there? Yeah, I'm a man. The desire is,
Yeah.
but I don't need that anymore. And I never needed it. I just thought I did. But no, I don't.
Do you think, because I think there's some, some definitions of guys that are cheaters, and then there's some guys that go through a midlife crisis. Would you describe yourself as a cheater, or would you describe yourself as maybe an addict? Because I think some people drink vodka, they drink tequila, and that makes them feel better because it fills them. Do you
Yeah,
think, how would you describe yours in any way like that?
I would describe myself as an addict, probably more. But the truth of the matter is, I was an addict. But an addict is selfish, right? An addict is
Yeah.
selfish, whether it's because I need another beer, because I need another, you know, I don't do drugs, so I'm trying to think what the right term is. Another hit, I guess. I,
Yeah.
I think an addict is an addict, and they're selfish when they do it because they only care about feeding that addiction. But I would say I was an addict. I guess that's why I wrote the poem "Addicted," right? Because
Yeah.
it really was um, the I was filling this void that I thought I needed to fill, and for now that I do have Christ in my life, that void really isn't a void. It's a temptation. It's still my weakness, and I got to check the lock every once in a while, make sure that lock's on it, right? And I attend. So one of the reasons I was in church this morning because I attend a men's prayer group, and one of the things that I am very open about is I know what my greatest weakness is.
What advice would you give to a woman who, because like I said, I deal with women who most their husbands or husbands who have wives are going through some kind of midlife crisis, but I do get a lot of calls from women who are, my husband is like a wiffle ball and he just needs, women to just fill him up. What do you recommend for them? Like what kind of advice would you give to them help their husband?
If sometimes, I mean, there's been times in my life and times in my marriage, my prior marriage, that I was beyond reaching. There is nothing she could have done. There were other times when my level of guilt was so high. There was always guilt. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I hated myself for doing it, but I'd still do it. There were times that I was weak enough and broken enough that I would go to her and you know, seek to reconcile and to try to put it all back together. And if those moments happen in your listeners' lives, I would say in those moments, those are the moments when a person is most likely to receive Christ, when he is broken, when he knows he's broken. Um, but it's hard when somebody's hurt you to treat them with love and say, I need you to come with me to church, right? But that's the best advice and really the only advice I can give is that the healer heals. And
Yeah.
so without him, you know, it's hard to fix anything, right? But
I I hear you. There are people that don't believe in God, and it's really hard.
right,
You you
I
don't
have.
have hope.
Will you indulge me another poem?
What?
Will you indulge me another poem from the book?
Another what?
Another poem from the book?
Yeah. Oh my gosh! I was like, what are you saying?
So,
Yes,
so
of
because
course.
we're talking about the brokenness and the broken spirit that
Yeah, please, absolutely.
this one
Please
just
read one.
in the book, and it's about the same topic. It is called Broken. It's broken homes and broken spirit. I knew it, but didn't want to hear it. The weight of men, the hearts unseen, the pain they cause acute and keen. I painted a rosy picture of a house shrouded in human love. I failed to open up my heart to the only one who could even start to heal the brokenness inside. But I was happy. No, I lied. I was less than malcontent. I forgot that love was heaven sent. I didn't have to be alone. If only I would just atone, admit my sin, accept the gift. Instead, alone I sit, adrift. That's where their husbands are.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's great.
So
You're amazing that you could write this because those are feelings. This is why I had you on the show, my friend, because I want them to hear another man share, yeah, that they've been broken and they got themselves out of it. And unfortunately, you didn't end up with your wife, which is what my goal with most of my women are. But
sure.
it's a very honest statement you've been making, and I applaud you
Well, then I'll say this:
100%.
I did not end up with her, but I respect her. Um, don't get me wrong. Sometimes we talk, and we've never had the same parenting style. So sometimes we talk, and even though our kids are adults, there's still frustration, and we'll still argue as if we're a married couple, although we are not. Um, so, um, but we can also now we can actually joke and tease with each other, and she can actually even joke and tease with my wife. I think her husband is absolutely amazing, and so glad that she found him. But
It's great.
that's it's a healthy place to be, but it was a very hard road to get here.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
I,
amen, my friend. So I want you earlier, so I hope we have some time. You and I actually spoke on the phone a few minutes to make sure you were set up for today. So I
right.
just wanted to hear what we talked about what you said about, you know, ADHD and just that feeling. If you
Sure.
could repeat that again, because I thought that was really profound.
I am happy to repeat it with the caveat that I've done no research into how true
Of
this
course.
is. So
But
I'm
I have. I
okay.
have. And so when
Fair.
you said that, I was like, there's a lot of truth to that.
So it's interesting. I was talking to one of my paralegals in the office recently, and we were talking about some struggles. And she has children who have ADHD, so she probably is much more schooled in ADHD than I am. I am very likely an undiagnosed ADHD or an ADD. Um, it's just that back when I was a kid, nobody gave that diagnosis. Now
Mm.
everybody's got it, um, but I'm constantly moving. I am definitely OCD for sure because I've got to have everything in its place and that sort of thing. But one of the things that she said to me is that her what she's been warned about with her children is that kids with ADD or ADHD are prone to grow up and more likely to become addicted, whether that's to drugs, alcohol, or other behaviors, and that they are less likely to stay focused on what's good for them and are likely to drift into things that are not. I had never heard that until literally this week. My book is long since, it's off to the publisher well before I heard this, but it was eye opening for me because I haven't researched it. And when she said it, I'm like, man, does that make sense? I've joked for years I was probably undiagnosed ADD or ADHD, and it's only half a joke because I actually believe it. But um,
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've never heard. But it makes sense when you said that. I was like, "Ah, yeah, that makes complete sense to me.
and
And I
often,
have to do
yeah,
my own research in my own
and
way.
often it's high achievers, right? High achievers with ADD or ADHD. because that's who I guess typically has, you know, they want to keep achieving, right? What do you keep achieving? Well, in my case, what I kept achieving was another woman.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're amazing. And the power within. So the power within is keeping the devil out.
The power within is Jesus. You know, it's interesting. So I have a long story about publishing. This book will be released under three separate publishers because I know law pretty good. I don't know publishing at all. This is a nightmare for me. But and I tell you that because one of the publishers has actually started, and it's not out yet, but he actually convinced me to start a company to try to help people who are struggling. And there's a lot to that, and there's a lot of stuff that has to be backfilled. But the reason I'm telling you this backstory is because when she named the company, she she had called me a hero, and I didn't really like her calling me a hero because I don't feel like anything I've done is heroic. But she wanted to name the company Hero Strong, and I was very resistant. Um, for one thing, I very much am a believer, and I think I cannot be out front. That is God's
Yeah.
place, mine.
Yeah.
But then it hit me. As long as the hero is Jesus, we can call that company.
Ah, there's a little trick. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
So I love that. Yeah.
so that is the name of the company, and it's again, it's kind of still in mothballs. It'll be coming out, um, but the point is the power that's within is Jesus. It's not me. It's not that I wrote the book initially as a secular book, writing it to trial lawyers because of our high rate of suicide and dependency on drugs and alcohol. But as I wrote it, I realized if I'm going to be truthful and honest, I have to talk about what that power really is, and that's actually how the book got named. It's been through 5 or 6 different names, um, and we landed on the power within because it is really a story about Jesus and the power that he did in my life.
Wow. Well, I applaud you. I think it's amazing. And I
Thank you.
applaud your wife for everything she went through as well as your kids and this new wife and this new baby. It sounds like you've done everything right. And what's great about knowing God is that you are forgiven. And you can have a second chance. And for all those people that say, "Yeah, but he should have some consequences for what he did." I can hear you say you have paid that price.
You know, it's interesting that so we're doing a session right now in our church, and I know that you don't necessarily want it to go this way, but it's called the Freedom Conference, and the Freedom Curriculum, which leads to a conference. And the thing about freedom, the thing that we literally talked about this morning in this conference is about forgiveness.
Yeah.
And the thing about forgiveness is that, and it's true in human forgiveness, but it's even more true in divine forgiveness, is that we are forgiven as a gift.
Mm.
And so if we approach any situation with, but you should pay, then we are judging. And
Right?
right. And then in the Lord's Prayer, it says, that we're only, he's only going to judge us in our trespasses as we judge those who's trespassed
Mm-hmm.
against us. Well, if we are judging those who have trespassed against us, then that's how
Mm-hmm.
we're judged. And so, yes, I am very thankful that I have his grace and his forgiveness. But I also have to remember, and, there are, and again, my book talks about betrayals that where I have been the victim, and I have to, in that sense, I have to forgive those people too. I have
Mm-hmm.
to truly do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So
See how that works?
for your listeners, you've been wronged, and as the person who did that same wrong to another woman, I can tell you, I know you've been wronged, but you got to forgive him, or you can't be forgiven.
Right? Yeah. There's a lot of the whole thing about drinking poison and expecting someone else to die, that
Yeah,
anger that comes within.
yeah,
And my goal is to teach my women your husband's behavior is not your problem.
right.
that's his struggle with God and his journey. You're on your journey. He's on his journey, and and when something goes wrong, of course he's your husband, but at the same time he makes his choices,
Yeah.
and he has to deal with them himself.
Yeah.
And the little minimum is NMP, not my problem,
Yeah.
which is a kind of funny way to say, let him go. Just let him deal with the devil. It's okay.
I like that. I heard it said this way today, and I think this one's very pointed to me. It's kind of, holding that grudge is kind of like lighting yourself on fire and hoping he dies from smoke inhalation.
Right? Oh my God. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that. I will
Yeah.
use that one.
It's not mine. It was one of my pastors today, but it really rang a bell with me. Like, yeah, that's
Lighting yourself on fire and hopefully he dies from smoke inhalation. That's good.
yeah,
That's good. That makes more sense, right?
yeah.
Okay, I like it.
It was vivid for me, but
Yeah, big time. But listen, I know we're running out of time. So I am so honored and so grateful that you have come on here and you've shared your soul. And it is not, what you've done is just going to be on my special place, because not everybody, this is not a wildly known podcast, but my fans are very loyal.
Right.
And what you've shared today will mean the world to them. And I can't thank you enough for opening your heart and your soul to share it with us.
Thank you for having me. I hope it helped somebody, Laurie. It was my honor to be here. It really was. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful, and I'm glad you're alive, and I'm glad you're able to share that story because your kids needed you. Oh, I'm so glad you had that vision.
Yeah,
So glad you had that vision.
The 3 kids are actually, we have Friday evening dinner dates almost every week now. So
Who? You and your old kids and the new one?
Yeah.
Wow. That's
I
really,
know
your
you were
wife
trying
makes
to,
it?
I didn't mean to start it
What?
again. I said, I know you were trying to end the podcast, and that's okay. But
No, but I need that because
Yeah.
I try to encourage. So you have a dinner date with all your kids and your current wife,
Yes.
and it's a family meal on a Friday night.
Yes.
What time does it start?
It's not happening tonight.
Okay.
And not
Sorry.
not just because of this. I know it's a standing Friday night dinner date. Usually, after everybody gets off of work, it's usually 6:30 or 7 before they get there. And Austin traffic is terrible, so we have in fact, we have a larger house just so that the kids can stay overnight if they choose to.
Oh, I like
But
that.
yeah, no, it's important.
That's family.
Yeah, and it is a true reconciliation with my kids, and I love it. We're still a work in progress, so it's not perfect. There's still some hurt, but everyone knows there's also a lot of love.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I'm glad your story ended the way it did. And
Thank
it's been an honor to have you. Okay, so guys, let's just remind this again. It's The Power Within. I'm going to have a link below, and feel free. It's on Amazon.
It is.
Okay, that's my go-to place. Okay, and have you done an audiobook yet?
I have not. It's funny. I sat here with my low quality camera, and I read the first chapter, but then when I looked at it, I'm like, that looks terrible. I'm not doing that. So
oh my gosh, audiobooks are the best because you don't have to read it, you can hear it.
Yeah, we will probably do one. It just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, with your voice and your tone, I think it'll be great.
Thank you.
So thank you, Todd. Get back to your Friday night, and we will see you soon.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow. Okay, that was a great interview. Did you tell the parts when he was getting emotional? Do you see the pain in people? Just because someone's having an affair on someone else doesn't mean it's fun and games. There's actually pain behind it. This man wrote a book because of it. Please get his book, The Power Within. It's actually Jesus. He said Jesus is in, and I said, well, that keeps the devil out, which is true. At one point I asked him, if your wife would have been kind and you would have been kind, or one or the other, do you think things would have been different? And he said no. And I am here to tell you that we don't know, right? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But nobody did that because there was a lot of fighting going on. She kept asking him, if you heard that part, when she kept saying, hey, are you, where are you going? What are you doing? What's happening? And I just, sorry, there's a kid walking behind me. This is life. But it's true and it's real life. And you control you, and you being kind to other people is all that matter. Even if that person is being cruel to you, It is okay to be kind to them because why? NMP. It is not your problem. It is not your problem that he is being an asshole. You have every right to just be kind and let someone else take care of him. We're talking about God. It's not your problem if someone behaves like a buffoon and hurts you. You have to keep yourself safe, but at the same time, not an opportunity to give anger back or be mean. Just be you. So, if you know anyone that has a great story to tell or some kind of life-altering situation, especially about marriage, have them reach out to me, thewifeexpert.com, or let's go to my email, thewifeexpert@gmail.com. And why do I have a gmail.com? Because I know it works. I have had the tail end of my website on there, and that never works because sometimes when things go wrong, I don't get emails. So email me at thewifeexpert@gmail.com, and please forward this, pass this on to your friends, pass this on to anyone you know who's been divorced or had someone cheat on them. This is a great story. This man wrote an incredible book, and let's all share it. And those poems, holy crap, I'm going to get that book and print those poems or hang them on my mirror because those are both amazing poems. So gifted, so gifted. Anyway, thank you. We'll see you next time.